I'm joined by Alistair Sanford in the studio. Good morning, Alistair.
Good morning, Belle.
Just explain to us what exactly has happened here.
Yes, well, this alleged plot was to kill the leader of the Danish branch of an Arab opposition group which has been identified as the ASMLA, the Arab Struggle Movement for the Liberation of Ahvaz. Now, it's one, apparently, of several groups which are seeking a separate state for ethnic Arabs in Khuzestan, which is a southwestern province in Iran. Now, the person arrested is a Norwegian citizen of Iranian background. He was held in Sweden on October the 21st, and he's been extradited to Denmark. The authorities say he was seen photographing and watching the Danish home of the leader of this group. Now, you may remember that at the end of September there was a huge security operation in Denmark and a manhunt with what the authorities then said was a serious crime. They didn't give the details, but 2 major bridges were shut. Ferry links between Denmark and neighbouring countries were halted. The Danish intelligence chief now says that those measures were over this alleged plot. Now, Denmark is accusing the government in Tehran, and particularly the Iranian intelligence service, of being behind it. The suspect denies the charges, and the Iranian government does too.
We've heard as well the Danish foreign minister saying that essentially the Iranian behaviour not limited to Denmark. Is there a sense here from the foreign minister that actually this could be going on in other EU countries as well?
Yes, and in fact, early this month, you may remember that France accused Iran of plotting to bomb the rally of a different exiled opposition group near Paris. That led to a diplomatic row, and France last week expelled an Iranian diplomat. A year ago, the founder of this Arab movement was shot dead in the Netherlands. Now, Iran accuses some Western countries of harbouring opposition groups that it says are terrorists. And it summoned the envoys of several countries after an attack on a military parade in Khuzestan in September, which killed 25 people. Now, the Persian language team here at Euronews tell me that it's a very strategically important region, and in the wake of that attack, many activists were rounded up and targets, and they targeted different areas in Syria because ISIL is said to have been behind it. Now, the significance of all this row could impact on the Iran nuclear deal, because remember, the EU is involved in trying to save it after the US pulled out. But here we've got Denmark calling for more EU sanctions. Now, Iran says that all this is just a plot of amongst its enemies to damage Iran's relations with Europe at a crucial time, but these developments clearly put that nuclear deal under even more pressure.
All right, thank you very much, Alistair Sanford, for bringing us up to date. I'm joined now from Washington, D.C. by Brett Bruen, formerly the Director of Global Engagement at the White House and currently President of Global Situation Room Consulting. Good morning to you, Mr. Bruen. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme this morning. We saw there in Pittsburgh protesters turning out, anger directed towards President Trump. Can you just talk us through where that anger comes from?
Well, I think emotions are raw both in Pittsburgh and across this country. We are reeling from these most recent attacks, the bombs that were sent to political leaders and the media here. The United States is, I think, in a state of shock. Unfortunately, we have a president who, rather than consoling, is exacerbating those tensions.
What's interesting there, you talk about the exacerbation of tensions. A lot of people have pointed fingers at the rhetoric that Trump has used in the past. Should we view all of this, whether it's the reaction to Trump and also his visit to Pittsburgh, within the light of the midterms that are happening next week in the US?
You can't help but look at the political dimension here. We are less than a week out from elections. The fact that Republican leaders were unwilling to accompany the president to Pittsburgh, I think, speaks volumes to his reaction to the missteps that he has had in the last several weeks in response to these tragedies.
In terms of this particular attack, this was on a Jewish community. Has it highlighted an underlying problem of anti-Semitism in the US?
There is undoubtedly a problem of anti-Semitism, a problem of minorities here in the U.S. The rhetoric, I think, whether it's against the Jewish community, against the Muslim community, against communities that are different from the base that Donald Trump is appealing to, have just been really so clear in the last several months. And I think, unfortunately, we are dealing with those consequences now.
Thank you very much, Brett Bruin. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there for today. President of Global Situation Room Consulting. Unexpectedly wild weather has left a trail of destruction in its wake, paralysing cities across the continent. In Italy, 11 people have died after severe flooding, while in France, many have been stranded overnight as a result of snowstorms. The extreme weather knocked out power in tens of thousands of homes, as Antonio Oliveira Silva reports now.
Floods and storms in Italy. The last 3 days haven't been easy, especially in Venice. Several people died in different parts of the country. Italy's favorite spot for tourists was severely hit. Tourists were caught off guard, even in historical cafes like Florian.
The Florian Cafe is the most ancient cafe in the world. Like all of this area in Venice, we've had this exceptionally high water. The problem for us was the wooden floors, which suffered serious damage. But we are working, and we will try to reopen as soon as possible.
In other establishments, life kept going. It was the case in this restaurant, business as usual. Damage was also reported across the north and center of the country. Many of the deaths were caused by falling trees during strong winds. The arrival of a massive polar air over the Iberian Peninsula has brought heavy rain, snowfalls, and low temperatures across Spain and Portugal as well. The bad weather left over 50,000 households without electricity. In France, more than 1,000 drivers were trapped in their cars for the night in the mountains as roads were engulfed in snowstorms. Nearly 2,000 homes were left without power.
This is a situation like we haven't seen in many years. And the experience tells us that despite the mobilization of the authorities and agents on the ground, it is sometimes difficult to convince some of the drivers using the highways of the dangerous situation, especially in the case of truck drivers.
The island of Corsica was placed on red alert for powerful winds. Antonio Oliveira Silva, Euronews.